Hello, and welcome to The Update, where Grants Pass stays informed, engaged, and moving forward together. I'm Aaron Kubik, your city manager. We're going to do a quick recap of this week's city council meeting. And with me today, I have Rick Riker. Councilor Riker, welcome.
Hi, Aaron.
So, Councilor Riker, one of the things that's great about Councilor Riker, he's our longest running council member. And how many years have you been actually serving as council?
I came on the council in April 2010.
2010, so quite a run. And have you fully enjoyed, obviously you've enjoyed your experience here.
Yes, that's one thing I've commented to people, said, how have you stayed around that long? Is just because I've enjoyed the camaraderie and just the challenges that we've faced. We've
managed through a lot of challenges, I think. And you and I especially, we've been working together for 13 years.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure working with you, Councilor. I was hoping to have you give us sort of an overview of the main items that council covered at our last council meeting.
The main items of the last council meeting, which is November 5th, we discussed the resolution adjusting the water rates for 2026. Also a resolution purchasing property at 124 Northwest Midland, and a resolution for new job descriptions on the non-bargaining.
So that's actually a relatively healthy council meeting, and it had some really important topics associated with it. The first, talking about a resolution adjusting the water rates, that's usually a big deal. So we have a utility bill. A lot of people call it the water rate, but it's actually not a water rate, is it? It's much more than just water that people get charged for.
Yes, and that has a lot of people upset that we have those extra fees on top of the water.
Yeah. Well, we are a full-service city, so we're responsible for transportation, water, wastewater, stormwater. There's many things that are on there, including a public safety fee that we have also on our utility bill.
Yeah, and a lot of people wish we actually had two separate mailings, but that increased our cost also. So it makes sense to just have one mailing.
Yeah. So the city council had to review and take a look at adjusting the water rates. And can you give us a little bit of historical background on what that looked like?
The water rates are put together to fund the new water treatment plant, and you have to have sufficient income coming in to match the bond if you're taking out a bond to cover that if you don't have cash on board. When the council was considering a new water treatment plant, the one thing we had to do is make sure that the rates covered the demands for the new plant and meeting the bond requirements and so forth for proper financing. But consequently, as time went on, the cost of the water treatment plant went up. And the last item that sort of was the nail in the coffin when we put in for a $50 million BRIC grant, and under the new administration, they didn't grant us that $50 million. We had to go back to the drawing board, and we did major changes on the design of the plant as well to reduce the cost. But ultimately had to come back for a new water rate increase.
So, Councilor Riker, during that discussion, staff had a couple of alternatives for you to consider as a council, and one was we were needing a 3% increase, and one of the options was council could increase the water rate by 3% in the first year and be done, or another option was council could take that 3% and amortize it out over a 3-year period. So the increase would be 1% each year for 3 years. And council chose the 1% each year for 3 years. Can you tell me a little more and why, from a policy perspective, council went that way?
The council discussed that aspect and felt it would be less impactful to the people by spreading it out over a 3-year period and 1% per year.
Yeah, because it's not only to the residents, and a lot of times we talk about residential fees, but it's also the commercial fees, and they're all done a little differently from a methodology perspective. But I think that's truly what the spirit of council was, is they were thinking that it would be less impactful and it'd be easier for individuals and businesses to budget that increase over a 3-year period.
I've been approached by many people asking about what effect it would have on the commercial rate. And it's interesting, the chart that was presented that evening showed on the 1-inch meter would go up about $5 in the first year from 2025 to 2026. On the 1.5-inch meter, it would go up a little bit more. To me, really shows that the increases can be tolerable considering the fact that we're getting a brand new water treatment plant.
Yeah, that, and I could see how that would be easier and more palatable for the community to do. And it was really in reaction, again, you mentioned it earlier, to the city ultimately not getting awarded that $50 million brick grant, because we were in a process of getting approved. And then when 2025 came around, brick funding and some of that federal funding just went away. We were intent to award, but we ultimately did not get that awarded. And so we had to do a few things. And you're right, we did modify. We did some valued engineering. We changed the engineering of the plant a little bit. And one of the things that I noticed also that we did where we were able to save some money is, since we weren't taking on those federal dollars, we were able to reduce some of the development requirements that were only required because they were federal dollars, which actually was a cost savings measure also for us. So, Councilor Riker, the second item from a council action perspective was a resolution approving the purchase of real property at 124 Northwest Midland Avenue. So for our listeners out there, can you give us some background on even where is 124 Northwest Midland? What type of property are we talking about?
It's the old Washington campus for the hospital.
Okay.
For Southern Oregon. That's where they used to exist. And a short time ago, we were able to purchase 8.3 acres from the Asante.
Why did the city buy that amount of property, and why that location?
One of the challenges for the city right now is providing housing in the area, and we felt that that would be a potential site for housing, and it could be considered for other uses as well, professional offices and possibly commercial.
So it's associated with, and we bought it with urban renewal dollars, which are tax increment financing dollars. And so ultimately we purchased that to help with potential housing or whatever type of development that the community sees fit for that location.
Correct.
One of the things I think that council did approve was what we call an opportunities plan, where we're going to hire a consultant to come in and help us envision what the possibilities are for that 8+ acres that we have out there, because that's almost a full city block. And so there's a lot of cool things that could happen.
There are developers out there that are willing to look at this type of property for development and willing to come in and do it. And when we did our LOC tour up in Bend a couple of years ago, we went through a site that had been converted for housing, but included commercial use as well. And one of the focuses for housing was to have affordable housing, but not just for anybody, but actually through the whole spectrum, the spectrum being the workforce. But the workforce can be the nurses and the doctors and other people that are good wage earners, because the shortage of housing is just not at the lower end. It's through the entire spectrum.
Oh, that's perfect. And that this property has all the ingredients to make a wonderful cake. It really does, because it's got the residential zone, it's got the commercial zone, it's got the acreage. So it really has a lot of pieces. All we need to do is figure out a couple little additives, throw it in the oven, and it'll come out great.
And given the location of this site too, makes it really ideal.
Yeah, it is a great location, north end of town. So the third real item with council dealt with a resolution creating new job descriptions and amending the non-bargaining and GPEA classification plan. That was the third council action item. Do you want to go into any details about that, Councilor?
Well, I was the chair on the task force that looked at the non-bargaining unit, and one of the things that came out during that time was Dr. McGrath was a consultant that looked at the city and looked at the different job classifications. And she said we needed to make amendments to some of that because some of the positions, if they weren't lacking, were possibly, I want to say, misclassified, that maybe the jobs had outgrown the original classification. So here was an opportunity to upgrade our classifications, and not the entire list that was given to us, but it was making progress.
Yeah, and that's really what it is about. From as a city manager perspective, I try to focus on making sure the city is run in the most efficient and effective way possible. And that includes the organizational structure of the city. And recently, we actually took on internally some additional services that we used to contract out. We had for 40 years at least, going back, I thought that was going back far enough, contracted for meter reading services. So meter reading services is when we need to make sure we're reading all of the meters that service our commercial and residential structures for water usage. And back in the day, it used to be you pop up the meter reader that's in the sidewalk and you read the numbers and you compare them to last month's numbers, and that's what you get as your water usage. Things are definitely advancing in time where we have touch meters now where you just sort of walk by, touch it, and it all downloads and it's all good to go. And that's really where we're headed now. But we've had those contracts, and it was time for us to renew the contract. And when we looked at renewing the contract, the price doubled. And so we tried to go out, and there really wasn't any other option. So we knew that we could take it on internally for a much less cost. But that did require us to through the budget process and stuff, get 2 additional FTE.
And the other thing we've been informed that it is caused to happen is not only better meter reading, but you also have an on-site person that's familiar with the system and determines whether the meter is getting too old or the box needs repairing, and other issues that were going on that were never reported to us because the meter reader just read the meter.
That is such a great point, Councilor, that you mentioned. It is true. When we have our 2 meter reader positions now that have been filled, that wasn't necessarily part of this reclassification that we did, but it was a reason for it. Those 2 meter readers are city staff, and they do look at the whole system now. They're not just looking for a meter reader. They're not just a one task item. So they are an additional extension of our water distribution system that has ultimately helped increase services to our constituents. And because of that, and because of the additional FTE, the additional responsibility, when we looked at reclassification, we didn't look at new FTEs. All I was wanting to do from that perspective is get council's approval to reclassify a utility worker 3 into a supervisor position. It was not hiring a new FTE. It was just reclassifying due to new responsibilities and supervisory responsibilities. So we've just gone through and recapped some of the important aspects that occurred at the last business meeting, but we also try to look forward in these podcasts also. From your perspective, Councilor, looking at policy and future items that might be of interest for the public, what's coming up in your future meetings that you think might be of importance to the community?
At our last meeting, we gave direction to staff to proceed with preparing the grant agreement for Elk Island on the homeless issue. And our next meeting on November 19th will include awarding that grant. I've already received quite a few emails that have been supportive of the council decision to move forward. And that was an interesting discussion because there was some hesitation on some of the councilors to hold off, and yet the majority of the councilors felt that we needed to move forward because Elk Island not only had the agreement to purchase the property, but also had a program that we felt we were comfortable with.
This has been a topic of discussion, this type of thing, for months and years, actually. And you being on council have experienced it multiple times with either this council or even previous council trying to come up with a solution. And of course, you sat through the process of us appealing to the Ninth Circuit Court and appealing to the Supreme Court and winning when it comes to time, place, and manner regulations and the ability for municipalities to do that. So we're coming to a point where we can sort of see light at the end of the tunnel, it seems like.
Yes, I think we have envisioned that it would be light at the end of the tunnel because we made a decision where we postponed this at previous meetings because some of the applications were incomplete. With the managed site up and running, the current sites would be able to be closed, and that would be a real plus because a lot of people have been really disturbed of the camp where it is currently located just across from City Hall and the impact it's had on the immediate community.
So looking at our schedule, if we do a notice of intent to award on the 19th, we would likely be able to do some kind of actual contract in front of council by the end of this calendar year, which would mean what from a service provider perspective?
That would give them the opportunity to start putting their program together, and especially acquiring or leasing the property for this purpose.
And then do you recall how long or what is the time frame based on the grant on when we would expect that to be operational?
I think it would be operational sometime in June.
So about 6 months down the road. That's correct. Yeah. So that would be quite exciting to start the summer with a fully functional resting site that provides an opportunity for people to get off the streets and have also any issues with mental health or drug addiction addressed. And that could be a really big win for our community coming into the summer.
And I would be hopeful that they would be able to be operational before that date. And also the fact is they will be coordinating with Mint, I think will really help, because Mint has already been active on referring people to different agencies for drug addiction and so forth. And also with their professional staff that Mint has on board, I think is a real plus.
I think having something in place like many other communities do is going to make a real positive change to the makeup of our community. And I'm really excited that council had the fortitude to continue through a process that ultimately will potentially get us a service provider that can make a positive change in our community. Councilor, thank you for being here today, and thank you for giving us a quick overview of what happened in the past council meeting and give us an idea of what the public might be interested in coming up at our next council meeting.
Thank you, Aaron. It's a good discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Now is the time for one of my favorite parts of the show, answering your questions. This is where we get to hear directly from you, the residents of Grants Pass, and respond to the topics that matter most to our community. If you've got a question about city services, upcoming projects, or how decisions are made, we would love to hear from you. You can always reach out to Mayor Council through email at mayorcouncil@grantspassoregon.gov. Or if you have a question about the podcast, feel free to reach out to me at acubic@grantspassoregon.gov. The question I wanted to highlight this episode was a question with regards to interim mayor. As you may be following, our mayor had to go away for a few weeks. And when the mayor is absent from a meeting or from the community, our charter states that the council president fills the mayor's role. The question is, when the council president is filling the mayor's role, are they still allowed to vote as a council member? This is a great question. When a city councilor is appointed as interim mayor, they still retain their council seat and voting rights unless they formally resign or are otherwise removed from that position. In our current structure, the interim mayor continues to serve as an elected councilor and as such is permitted to vote on matters before the council. This arrangement is consistent with our city charter and municipal code, which allows an interim mayor to fulfill both roles temporarily to ensure continuity of governance. Well, that wraps up our episode of The Update. I want to thank our guest, Councilor Riker, for the City Council update. You can find this episode and future ones on the city's website and on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We plan to release new episodes twice a month following council meetings. I'm Aaron Kubik. Thank you for being part of the Grants Pass community and listening to The Update, where Grants Pass stays informed, engaged, and moving forward together.